There you go. And then hit record and we're good.
Okay, recording.
Hey everybody, welcome here. We're just going to give a few minutes, not even a few minutes, a couple minutes to get everybody in. Please use the chat box to let us know where you are from and anything else you want us to know about you today, maybe how you're feeling, how excited you are to learn about crisis communications. Awesome, look at you all coming in. That is great. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dustin Wessling. I am with ILEA Board of Governors, and along with my colleague Corinne Kessel, CSEP, we've been putting together these webinars for you. We'll just give you a quick minute to get in and get settled. Tui, can you throw the slide deck up? Welcome here. If you're just joining us, grab the chat box, throw in where you're coming from. Awesome, it's a great turnout today. And lots of familiar faces and lots of new ones. Awesome. Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. So if you've just come in, throw in the chat box where you're coming from. Just a reminder to use the Q&A box for questions and the chat box for your chats amongst each other. We'll keep an eye on the Q&A box for questions once we get to that point. But feel free to chat amongst yourselves in the chat box or leave glowing comments of recommendation or other niceties in the chat box. I'm going to turn it over to Corinne, who's going to get us a couple quick messages from us, and we'll get right into this.
Hi, everyone. So just wanted to remind everybody to log into ILEA Hub and update your contact information. We know there's been a lot of change and want to make sure that we can stay in touch and ensure you access all your member benefits and that you have access to any resources and support that you need during this time. And now I would like to introduce Alex. So Alex Plaxen is a former founder of Little Bird Told Media and is a current vice president of experience strategy at Nifty Method Marketing and Events. He graduated with a master's in tourism administration with a focus on event and meeting management from George Washington University. Alex is actively involved in leadership roles in the meetings and event industry, currently as Meetings Mean Business Ambassador and the incoming board of director of Meeting Professionals International Potomac chapter. In addition to his work in the events industry, Alex has been honored locally and internationally as an emerging thought leader, recognized as one of Meetings and Conventions Magazine's Rising Stars of 2019. He's a recipient of Meeting Professionals International's Rise Award for Young Professional Achievement in 2018, and he is named to the inaugural BizBash Top 500 People in Events in 2018 and Top 1000 in 2019, Meetings Today magazine's 2018 Meetings Trend Centers, and Connect Association 40 Under 40 in 2019. Would like Alex to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. So I'm going to pull up these slides right now. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be here today. I know that this is not a sexy topic, but it is. It's very important. And I think, you know, I've been talking about this for almost 3 years now. And I think we're finally starting to realize why. And that we really do need to take this very seriously. Because this is something that most events don't have, surprisingly. I did some research with Eventry on this topic to find out how many events actually do have not a crisis management plan, but a crisis communications plan. And we found that less than 10% of all events had a crisis communications plan. And every time I've spoken about this for the last 3 years, I ask my audience, you know, the same questions. And it's pretty much the same. In a room of about 100 people, it'll be maybe 2 or 3 hands up who not only have a plan, but know their plan and know that their staff knows their plan and are trained how to do it. Which is kind of terrifying when you think about it. I know I go to a lot of events, and to think that the events I'm going to, if something were to happen, they have no plan in place for how to communicate with me or what they're going to communicate. It's kind of a terrifying thought. And I think that the coronavirus and COVID-19 really just took that all into perspective, because this is a crisis that we are all dealing with. So I do want to kind of just get a feel of the room. How many of you put a 1 in the chat if you do have a crisis communication plan? Put a 2 if you don't. So interesting split. I'd say about a third of you do, which is interesting. So before I start, I do want to let you know that you can download these slides. If you text the word events to 55444 in the United States, that'll work to download the slides. Otherwise, I'm about to drop a link in the chat as well. Just drop that link. You can go there to download the slides too, and we'll share this throughout in case you missed it. But that is a way for you to download the slides if you want them. So here's the good news is a crisis communications plan is very simple to do. It's 3 simple steps. You audit your vulnerabilities, you create a plan, and you know your plan. Yes, it's simple, but it does take a lot of work, right? And I think that's part of the reason why we have not done it, right? I saw a lot of 2s in here. And don't feel bad, because you're here to learn. And this is an opportunity to create a plan, right? And although we are going to be talking a lot about COVID-19 today and how this plan relates to that, what I want you to realize is you should be creating a plan for any crisis moving forward, not just COVID-19, right? We're already in the midst of this. It's kind of to the point where unless it's impacting your event specifically at this point moving forward, there's not a lot to say about it that hasn't already been said, right? So I do want you to focus on creating a plan that's going to work for any situation moving forward. This is a level 4 crisis. That is the highest level. And what that means is it's basically impacting all of us, right? It's making national news, and we all have to respond to it in some manner, right? I do want to kind of go over some characteristics of how to identify each of the crisis levels, because in your plan, what you should have is a different strategy for each level, right? Your response for a level 4 crisis should not be a level 1 crisis response. Your response for a level 1 or 2 crisis should not be a level 4 response. It should match up, right? And so it's important to be able to recognize when you're in a certain crisis level. So crisis level 1, this is minimally intense. The crisis attracts little or no attention. You may get some information requests prior to your event or during your event. You know, someone might be asking a question on social media. You may get an email, right? But it's not any massive amount. And the public and or media are virtually unaware of the crisis, right? This is pretty much internal. If there is a crisis, it's your team that knows about it, and maybe some attendees. Level 2 crisis is moderately intense. So the crisis is starting to attract slow but steady media attention, and media can be social media, right? It can be attention from your attendees. It can be attention from her respective event attendees. It can be your stakeholders who are starting to notice. It can be bloggers, right? It's not just national media. It's not local media when we say media. Your external stakeholders are probably going to be making some inquiries about what's going on. They may be getting questions that they can't answer. And the public at large may be aware of the crisis, but probably not, right? They probably are unfamiliar. Crisis level 3, this is where it gets intense. The crisis is causing growing attention from local regional media. The media contacts non-event staff for information about the crisis. So this could mean people back at your home office, if you have one. In addition to the media, stakeholders and community partners are on site. So a lot of people are asking questions and want to know what's going on. And then the affected parties are threatening to talk to the media. So if it's impacting attendees, your sponsors, your exhibitors, things like that, your vendors, they may be threatening to talk to the media about what's going on. And lastly, level 4, the media has an immediate and urgent need for information about the crisis. So you can kind of see why the crisis we're in right now is a level 4 crisis. Your CEO may need to provide a statement of empathy or caring, right? This is a health crisis, so that is natural that you would want an empathy or caring message. And one or more groups or individuals may express anger or outrage. At the beginning of this crisis, there were quite a few events that had to cancel with very short notice, and people were angry and upset. We have an opportunity now for a lot of you with upcoming events in the next few months to get ahead of it, right? It's not going to be a surprise necessarily. People are kind of expecting it at this point. And then broadcast and print media may appear on site for live coverage. If you're not going on site, they're not going to appear on site right now. But if you were on site and broadcast and print media appeared, you would know you were in a level 4 crisis. So this is the stages of crisis communications. This is what you should be doing in each stage. Pre-crisis, you should be monitoring your crisis risks, right? You should be looking at social media, trying to figure out what's going on. You are making decisions about how to handle potential risk, right? The creation of your crisis communications plan or the readjustment or review of your crisis communications plan is making decisions about how to handle this risk. And then training the people who will be involved, right? Your stakeholders, your speakers, your spokespeople, anyone who is going to be communicating on your behalf, they need to be trained, right? And that should happen pre-crisis. During the crisis, you're going to collect and process information for crisis team decision making. And then you're going to create and disseminate those crisis messages that you craft. Post-crisis, you want to assess the crisis management effort. How'd you do, right? Did you do a good job? Do things need to change? Do you need to adjust your plan in the future? How'd you do, right? And then you need to provide follow-up crisis messages as needed. Sometimes one message is not enough. You need to be monitoring the response. Are people liking it? Are they satisfied? Are they sharing it to let other people know, right? Or are they asking a ton of questions, right? Are they looking for more information? If they are, you need to provide follow-up. So normally, this is what would happen in each stage of crisis communications. However, in this situation, we're already in the crisis, right? We missed the pre-crisis stage. If you weren't already doing this, right? Drop a 1 in the chat if you completely missed the pre-crisis stage and now you're trying to scramble because you're in the crisis and you didn't monitor your crisis risk. You didn't make decisions about how to handle the risk and the people who are involved were not trained. Drop a 1 if you missed that stage. Because I think a lot of us did, and that's part of the problem. That's part of why you've seen a lot of probably terrible crisis communications messages out there. A lot of companies completely missed this stage, right? So they're scrambling right now. Here's the good news, right? There is some good news to this. You have time now to do that stage for other crises that may be coming, right? Yes, you may have missed the pre-crisis stage for COVID-19, but you don't have to miss the pre-crisis stage for future crises. But we are in a stage right now where we are collecting and processing information for the crisis team decision making. We're creating and disseminating crisis messages, and we're trying to make decisions about how to handle potential risk and train the people who will be involved, right? We're kind of crashing these two stages together. By failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. Ben Franklin said this. We've probably heard this since 4th grade, elementary school, and yet a lot of us still were not prepared, right? How do you collect information? There's kind of three little categories that you should be collecting information in. This information is going to help you make your decisions and also help you craft your messages. So the first category here is your reasoning, right? What is the reason for you creating a message? And there are some questions that you can ask. What was the initial source of the crisis? Obviously, we know in this situation what the initial source of the crisis was, but some crises we won't know, and that is something that you're going to have to figure out. Is what was the initial source of the crisis? And then, are the claims reasonable and legitimate? Sometimes they won't be. Sometimes there are rumors that are spread. Sometimes people make assumptions about something that's not actually true, and that gets spread as well. It's important that the claims are reasonable and legitimate. Sometimes someone is just trying to do harm, right? There is something called malevolent acts of malevolence, where someone is intentionally trying to do harm to your event. So it is important that you know if the claims are reasonable and legitimate. And then what are the volume of responses? If you have 2 people who are complaining about something at an event for 50 people, that might be something that you want to address. If you have 2 people who are responding at an event for 2,000 people, you can address those people individually, right? So it's important that you understand the volume of responses based on the amount of attendees that you have. 10 people, 15 people for an event that's 150,000 people is not a lot. 10, 15 for an event that's 150, 200, that's a lot, right? So it's important that you understand, what is the volume of responses in relationship to the amount of attendees that we have, and is that something that we need to respond to? In your crisis communications plan, you should have that number, right? You should have made the decision of, if we reach this number, this is when we need to respond. Then the reaction section, right, of processing and collecting this information. Why are you responding? If you can't answer why you're responding, you probably shouldn't be putting out a crisis message, right? This is kind of the hardest question to ask, right? Why are you responding? It seems very vague, but oftentimes if we take a pause and ask ourselves these questions, we sometimes discover that there is no reason for it, right? And then, who is your target audience? This is important. Are you talking to your attendees? Are you talking to the media? Are you talking to friends and family of attendees if something goes wrong, right? Are you talking to your sponsors? Are you talking to your exhibitors? Who is your target audience is very important. I've seen a lot of crisis messages where you see one message go out and then another message and another message, and they seem to be talking to completely different people, right? So it's important that you know who your target audience is. And then, does the crisis level match the response? I mentioned this earlier. You want to make sure that your crisis level, if it's a level 1 or 2, is not a level 4 response. You've probably heard the term or the phrase, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. That's kind of the point here. We don't want to take a crisis that's a 1 or 2 level and turn it into a level 3 because we responded too strongly. And then, are you amending an issue or answering queries, right? Are you fixing a problem, or are you just answering questions that people have and need information on? This is really important as you're trying to figure out what your reaction is going to be. And then your response. What feedback are you receiving from your stakeholders, right? Are they satisfied? Are they happy? Are you going to need to do any follow-up? And then, are you replying to one user or multiple users? If you're only replying to one person, sometimes it's worth just sending them a direct message and responding directly. If you think that this is information that multiple people need, even if you're only hearing from one person, then you want to be responding to multiple users and put it out on social media or send an email. And then, is this the appropriate channel, right? Snapchat may be great, and it may be fun to engage with attendees there, but is it an appropriate channel to put out a crisis message? Possibly not, right? So you want to kind of know what the appropriate channels are before sending out your messaging. So your decision-making questions, this is another kind of group of questions that you want to answer for yourself. Who will speak on behalf of the organization? In your crisis plan, you should have a list of spokespeople for each type of crisis that you may have happen, right? So if you do a vulnerability audit and you discover all the things that can go wrong, categorize them, and then decide who's going to be the lead spokesperson for each category and who's going to be the backup spokesperson. What that means is in your crisis plan, you'll have those categories listed out and you'll know, okay, we're in category X and category X's lead spokesperson is this person, right? So it's going to help you make that decision much faster about who's going to speak on behalf of your organization. What will they say? So that's where message mapping comes into play, which I'm about to get into and show you how that's done. Where will they communicate? So what modalities are you using? Are you using social media? If so, what platforms? Are you using event app notifications, push notifications, text messaging? Are you using email, right? So where are you planning to communicate? When and how often will you address the public? So this is important in ongoing crises, is trying to figure out, okay, especially if you're on site, it's in 15 minutes, we're going to get back to you with more information, right? It lets them know you've got 15 minutes. You don't have to sit on your phone and watch the time tick by waiting for the next piece of information. We're going to update you in 15 minutes unless something is urgent and we need to update you sooner. What this does is it prevents them from going down this rabbit hole of, I'm not getting information from you. I need to find information. I need to find information. In 15 minutes, if you don't have any more information, that's okay. Still put out a message saying, at this time, we have no more information to provide you. We are still following up on the ongoing crisis, and we will update you again in 15 minutes, right? It's not hard, but it lets people know that you're still thinking about them. And then again, that question, why would they speak? Sometimes the hardest part of crisis communications is knowing when not to say anything at all. And that is also an essential part of crisis communications. The hardest part of crisis communications is knowing when not to say anything at all, right? I just said that. So the message mapping, this is really important. Take notes, right? Because this is something that you can use for really any situation in messaging and communicating, but especially during a crisis, this is going to be extremely valuable because it is a concise and clear way to craft a message in a quick amount of time, right? So the first part of this is the main idea. What are you trying to consistently demonstrate throughout all your communications? And it should not be, we're canceling our event or we're thinking of postponing our event, right? That's not the main idea. The main idea should be something that you're not actually pivoting away from. This should have been the main idea for you all along. Right. So here's an example. Our brand is trustworthy. You can count on us to do what's in the best interest of our stakeholders. Right. If that's your main idea now, it probably should have been your main idea before this. Right. You don't necessarily have to pivot away from that idea that your brand is trustworthy and you can count on us to do what's in the best interest of our stakeholders. That's a pretty generic idea, but it's something that's powerful and means something. Right. You're building trust. And you're letting people know you're going to do what's in their best interest. From there, you want to craft 3 key messages. And this is what's going to change. This is where you want to be pivoting your messaging, right? And your 3 key messages can be anything as long as they demonstrate and make your attendees and your the people who are reading your messages believe your main idea without actually having to say, this is our main idea, right? Here's 3 questions that are kind of good starters that you should always be thinking about. What is the scenario? So what's happening? Who needs to be reached? And what's our message to them? And then what is the concern, right? What are we afraid people are going to think if we get this wrong, right? So here's an example for that previous main idea about being trustworthy and doing what's in the best interest. What is the scenario? We're monitoring the situation closely, right? COVID-19 exists. We're going to monitor the situation closely. who needs to be reached, our stakeholders, and what do they need to be told, that we empathize with them. So we empathize with our stakeholders is the next key message. What are we concerned about? We're concerned that they may lose their trust, right? So in order to relieve them of that concern, we are going to tell them we plan to be transparent about our decision-making process. So that's an easy way to kind of figure out what your key messages should be. But you're not done there, right? Those are pretty simple. If you just put out those messages, people would probably assume that it's just a lot of talk, right? That you're just using the same stuff that everyone else is saying. So you want to prove to them that those messages are true, which is where 3 proof points come in. Each of your 3 key messages should have 3 proof points, and they act as evidence for your 3 key messages. So this example is for the we are monitoring the situation closely. Here's your 3 proof points. Here's some links to resources we're using to monitor the situation, right? We're not going to keep that in our back pocket. We're actually going to tell you so that you can go look at them yourself, right? And you can kind of get an idea of what we're seeing as well. And you don't have to wait for us to provide you with an update either. We've consolidated all major updates here, right? Here's a landing page on our website with all the major updates. Here is a blog post with all of our major updates, right? So that's a great proof point for we're monitoring the situation, right? You're putting all your major updates in one place. And then a CDC recommendation, right? A headline, something that shows that it's timely. The CDC has recommended all events over 50 people be canceled or postponed, right? So something that also proves you're monitoring the situation closely. And that I think is actually even out of date. I think it's 10 people now. So keep in mind that you want to provide the most recent update, right? Or headline as a proof point. So here's what your message map, a complete message map would look like. In red at the top is your main idea. In pink, we've got our key messages. And then under each key message, we have 3 proof points. So I kind of already went over the we're monitoring the situation closely proof points. Some proof points for we empathize with our stakeholders. We understand the investment our attendees make in attending this event. We know the impact a cancellation has on your business goals. Your health and safety is our #1 priority in any decisions we make, right? You can even talk about your refund policy here if that's changing, transferring registrations over to a future event, things like that. And then we plan to be transparent about our decision-making process. Your proof points could be any cancellation will be communicated in a timely manner. So we're going to let you know as soon as we know that the event is canceled. Refund information will be available as soon as possible, right? We're going to be transparent about that. And we do not take any of our decisions lightly. All of these act as proof points to prove your key messages. Your key messages make them believe your main idea without actually having to say your main idea. Practice this, right? This is something that is going to be very valuable for any messaging situation, but particularly for crisis communications. The clients that I've worked with who have practiced this, I can throw any scenario at them and they can come up with a message map in about 5 minutes, right? As long as they have some kind of information about what's going on. So here's a little improv exercise that you can practice with your spokespeople. Doing some spokespeople training is extremely valuable. So just like you want to train the people who are communicating on your behalf, whether that's through social media, etc., the people who are actually going to be speaking, and I've been seeing a lot of organizations creating videos with their spokespeople, right? It's important to have them know how to speak to the media. So this is kind of an exercise you can use. First, acknowledge the question, right? Acknowledge the question. So if someone asks you a question, repeat it back to them. Say, I hear you saying this, or I believe you're asking this, right? Acknowledging the question. But sometimes those questions don't get us to the messages we actually want to communicate, which is why a bridge is important. So be bridge, right? You're bridging to the communication message that you actually want to share. And you've probably heard these bridges used all the time, especially in politics. You've probably heard the key thing to remember is blank. I can tell you right now, blank, right? And let me add blank, or what should be understood about this is blank, or the most important issue for us is blank, right? And after that bridge, then you can communicate your message. So that's a really good exercise, improv exercise. Practice with your spokespeople, your pool of spokespeople that you have. Throw a bunch of scenarios in a hat. Have someone ask them questions about that scenario and see how they respond. So here's some best practices that you could and should be using. The first is be transparent, right? I've already kind of mentioned transparency a bit. It's an expectation right now. And the reason why is because uncertainty can cause confusion and panic. There are a lot of people, if you have not canceled yet and your event's coming up in the next 3 months, there are a lot of people wondering why. And you need to be transparent about the decision-making process because right now there are going to be attendees of your events who are sitting there going, why has this not been canceled, or why has this not been postponed yet? Or thinking about, are they going to cancel their plans? Emerald City Comic Con was one of the first events that had to cancel back in March, and they were very transparent about their process. Centralizing your information, I kind of already mentioned this. Again, create an updated blog post or landing page to share your information. Camera World did a great job for their photography show. Breaking news, the event's been postponed. We'll continue to support the show when the new date's released in September 2020. Please see the organizer's website for more details. So they had a page on the website specifically with this information. Do not delete. This is kind of a controversial and one I get a lot of questions about. Don't delete old posts if they're out of date. Post clear updates that say this is the newest update. Please follow this information. If you have a landing page with all your updates, then that's the best way to do it, is put it at the top, even have a page break with the old updates below it. But put a date on everything, make sure people know what the newest update is. If you're talking about Twitter or Facebook, pin those new updates to the top of your pages. Put a link in your bio on Instagram to your page with these updates, right? The reason you don't want to delete is it can lead to mistrust, right? If you delete posts, people want to know, did they get it wrong? Is there something they're trying to hide? Why can't I find that old post with that piece of information? People want to see the process, so deleting your updates doesn't really do you any service anyway. And you don't want to build mistrust, right? So South by Southwest had a really good example of that, where they had their full statement. They did not delete old updates saying, we're still planning to go ahead, which at the beginning they had been saying, right? They didn't delete those posts. They just made a big update, right? Email, first and foremost. So the reason why email is the most effective and versatile way to communicate is MPI. This is a great example. Although they did just postpone to November, at the beginning of this, they hadn't yet. And they had very clear message mapping with 3 key messages, and they were able to communicate all 3 key messages in one email. That's what makes email so great, is that whole message map you can have in one email. It's very difficult to put out all those messages in one specific message on social media. You can do it on Facebook, you can do it on Instagram. Twitter is going to be really hard to do it. Even LinkedIn has a limit to the amount, the length of a post, right? So it's probably email is the best. Here's the danger you run into with email. And why you really need to be posting elsewhere in addition to email is right now there's a lot of furloughed people. And if the email they signed up for your event with was their work email, they may not have access to it. So that is really, really important that you're not just emailing, although you should, but you should also be supplementing that with social media. So you want to establish expectations. What does this mean? You need to tell your attendees where and how often you intend to communicate. Inbound, which is HubSpot's user conference, they're a marketing platform, marketing and sales platform. They have a website and they were very transparent about, here's our help page with this information, right? If you don't tell people where you're going to communicate and how often you intend to communicate, it's very difficult to build those expectations and for them to find the communications they're looking for. We oftentimes forget to tell our attendees. We have to train them as much as we have to train our staff about where to find things. If your event's in a specific city, use your CBeebies, your DMOs. They're gathering up-to-date resources and information. They have them on their websites. You can even direct your attendees to their websites with their resources and information as well. They're a great resource. You should use them. Right. And then monitor your social media. You need to dedicate some resources to monitoring and responding to questions and comments because there's a lot coming in, right? The same way that people have lost access to their work emails, they are turning to social media for comments and questions that normally they may have emailed. So it's important, you know, obviously, if you're something as big as Coachella, you may have 1.3, you know, hundred or 1.3 thousand comments on your post about cancellation or postponing. Hopefully you don't, but it's important that you need to see what those are and respond, right? If you just leave comments and questions out there in the open, people are going to assume that you are not taking them seriously. Exercise empathy. Is your communication staff trained in customer service? This is really important. For a lot of events, the people in charge of their communications are marketers. And while some people will say, yes, my marketers are trained in customer service, they know exactly what they're doing. Unfortunately, there is a large percentage of marketers who are trained to market and only market, right? They are trying to push out information. They're trying to sell things. They are now having to switch to a customer service role that they may not be familiar with. So if that's the case, there's a lot of free resources online. Get them trained in customer service. There's some that are paid courses as well, but just Google customer service training and make sure that they understand empathy, right? That it's not just about butts and seats anymore. Austin and South by Southwest did a fantastic job when they had to cancel last minute, where they built funds around helping out the vendors and the restaurants and people who were hurt by the cancellation, right? It did a big number on Austin's restaurants and service staff, the amount of money that they normally would bring in. So it's important that they're trained, right? They did a great job of kind of rallying around the city. So consistency is key. I hate to call out LA Pride, but make sure any changes are communicated across all platforms. LA Pride is a good example. On their website, it says new dates are coming soon, but on their Twitter, in the header, it still has the old dates, right? So just make sure that if you have new dates coming soon somewhere, that you're having that posted everywhere. Right? If you're removing dates somewhere, make sure they're removed everywhere. If you're putting new dates somewhere, make sure they're put everywhere. Consistency is key because you don't know what platforms people are comfortable with looking for information. So if someone never goes to LA Pride's website, but they follow them on social media, they may go to their page and see May 31st, June 9th. Okay, it's still happening, right? So it's important that consistency across the board. You're anywhere that your dates are posted, anywhere that information is posted, it needs to be consistent. And if anyone knows the LA Pride organizers, please tell them to update their Twitter header. And then don't wait to communicate. This is level 4 crisis. If your registration is open, you have something to say. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, we're postponing or canceling, right? Aspen Ideas Festival is a great example. Back in March, they had no plans to cancel or postpone. Their event was too far out. I think it's in November. But they were posting information relevant to COVID-19 and the current crisis, just to stay relevant, right? And to make sure that people didn't think they were ignoring the crisis, right? But if your registration is open, you absolutely have something to say and people are looking for answers. So don't wait. All right, I know that was a lot of information and I'm sure some of you have questions. So I'm gonna open up the floor to questions, and in the meantime, I will also put up my contact information. Again, if you're looking for these slides, you can text events to 55444. You can also check out the Nifty Method website. And I will drop that link in the chat again to download the slides.
Hey, Alex, I'm just checking out the chat box to make sure there's nothing that got lost in there. Awesome. Here we go. We got some questions coming up. Do you want to take it straight from the Q&A box, Alex?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Oh.
It's not dropping down.
Yeah, if it's easier, I can just read them to you.
That works.
Okay. Do you, Alex, offer comms and PR services to event managers in the US or also in Canada?
I do. Yeah, me and my team are completely trained in this. We audit vulnerabilities and craft crisis communications plans for your team. We also do training, so we will train your staff on how to use the plan. And then we also offer the service. It's kind of a retainer. So you give us the dates that you want, the range of dates. Typically, it happens over the event, and we're on call. That if a crisis were to happen, we'll craft your messages for you.
That's awesome. Next question, can you give an example of a level 1 crisis? And does a level 1 crisis necessarily require a response to all attendees or just those asking questions?
Yeah, so one example I use often for like a level 1 crisis is you're running out of coffee. Or the bathroom is,
Right.
one of the bathrooms is flooding.
Right.
A level 1 crisis could be there's traffic in the city and buses from hotels are late coming to the convention center, things like that. If there's rain that's causing traffic, letting people know, hey, registration's opening, or we're postponing the opening keynote 30 minutes, things like that.
So basically our entire job is a level 1 crisis.
Yeah, our entire job is level 1 crisis. And no, oftentimes it doesn't require a response. It's one of those things where you really should be asking yourself, like, why are we doing this? Sometimes it is easier to just reach out to the people asking the specific questions, unless you think it's going to impact a lot more people, in which case you're probably closer to a level 2, and you do want to respond to everyone.
Right. So Alex, where do you think, as we, the United States is talking about opening up for business, we're a little bit behind you in Canada, or a whole lot behind you. Where do you think the next crises are going to be with this? Like, where do you see the importance to have a crisis communications plan in what we're in right now moving forward?
So there's a lot of talk about the next stage, right? Stage 2 of this crisis, or the next wave, is another way that I've heard it described, where they're actually saying it's going to be worse than the first wave. And what I'm most concerned about, and what I'm talking to my clients about from a risk perspective, is if our events are in the next 6 months and the second wave hits, do we want to be the event that has an outbreak of this virus at the event?
Right.
that is the one that I am working with my clients the most on right now, is if we take the risk and open the event and do all the things we've been told to do as far as safety and health, if there were something to happen, how are we going to address that?
Great. Well, not great, terrible. You know what I mean. This was great. I don't see any more questions. As always, you've got Alex's contact information here. He's a tremendous, tremendous guy, and I know he would be more than happy to answer any of your questions that you have post this webinar, or if you're watching this webinar on our recorded dashboard, you can reach out at any time. Thanks so much, Alex. We're going to flip over our slideshow here. Dun, 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 dun. Don't leave us just yet. I'm going to tell you about what webinars we have coming up. As soon as Tui switches us over, here we go. Awesome. Okay, one more slide there, Tui. So we have our Clear Head, Strong Mind series. The negative bias is what we're talking about on Friday. So that's Friday, May 1st. Yes, I am with you. I cannot believe it's May 1st this week. It's going to be 3 p.m. Central Time, facilitated by our wonderful friend Angela Braun. Yeah, so if you've been tuning into the Clear Head, Strong Mind, you know what this is all about. If you haven't, there is lots of time to catch up. So check that out. Next up, we have proactively preparing for the future of events, a brainstorm led by Steve Kimball. For those of you who don't know who Steve Kimball is, you are in for a treat, because he is a very charismatic, energetic guy, and I'm sure this is going to be a really great session. Registration for this session has just opened up yesterday. So I expect that this session will max out at 1,000 people, and we're about a quarter of the way there. So if you're interested in this session, I strongly recommend that you get yourself registered today. And what do we got left on here, Tui? I think just one more reminder of our COVID-19 resources. If you go to ileahub.com, click on the COVID-19 resources page, you'll find virtual chapter meetings, online resources, all of our webinars. And yeah, I think that's it. One more request for you, if you're an ILEA member, to update your contact information. I promise we will stop asking this once you all do it. I know who you are. So please take the time to do that, and we're looking forward to communicating more great sessions in the future. Again, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time. You're always such a great ambassador for our industry and our community, and we really appreciate it. I fully expect that we will tap you on the shoulder again. So in advance, I'm thanking you for that as well. Thank you to Tui Deep from LA. She's been running our slides and keeping us organized on the back end. And on behalf of the Board of Governors, myself and Karine Kessel, I hope everybody has a great and safe day. The week has only just begun, so let's make it amazing. Take care, everybody.